Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Sinate, Chief General Manager at the Export Import Bank of India. I head the research and analysis group of the bank, and I'd like to welcome all of you to another edition of our masterclass on impact of the Union Budget 2024-25 on select sectors. It is an honor to have all of you here, and the number of participants joining us for the webinar today is indeed very encouraging. Before we begin, I want to present a few logistics. At this time, all the participants are in listen-only mode. Today's webinar will have a presentation on the topic, and please feel free to ask any queries or share your remarks via the comments box on your screen. We will respond to your comments or questions at the end of the presentations. We will also provide a copy of today's presentation to all participants after the webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of its mandate to promote international trade from the country, India Exim Bank undertakes research on various industry sectors and countries, and also macroeconomic issues. Towards this end, the bank launched the initiative of conducting online masterclasses in 2019, long before this became the new normal. The masterclass platform has helped us facilitate discussions and disseminate knowledge on pertinent subjects, and also to disseminate information emerging from India's Exim Bank's in-house research. We are pleased to welcome you once again to today's masterclass on the impact of the Union Budget 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's budget builds on the vision outlined in the past couple of budgets and presents a roadmap for directing the economy on a sustained high growth trajectory towards Viksit Bharat. India has exhibited extraordinary reliance to global headwinds in 2024 and is well positioned to tackle global challenges in 2025, although there are some risk factors. The budget has laid the foundation for strengthening the domestic economic environment by focusing on 9 priority areas. And these areas are urban development, productivity and resilience in agriculture, manufacturing and services, inclusive human resource development and social justice, employment and skilling, energy security, infrastructure, innovation and research and development, and next generation reforms. This webinar shall broadly cover the key budget highlights, present the deficit statistics, and assess the impact of the budget on exports and impact on select sectors. Let me now take the opportunity to introduce my colleagues who will be presenting the highlights of the budget. First, I have with me my colleague, Ms. Janvi Singh. She is an economist with Exim Bank India, who has extensive experience in analyzing international trade, economic policies, agriculture, and industry dynamics. Her research work has helped provide key policy recommendations to both the central and state governments. She has also worked on institutional capacity building assignments for export finance in various countries, including countries like Rwanda, Ghana, and Barbados. Our second speaker, my colleague, Ms. Neha Raman, is also an economist with India Exim Bank, who has considerable experience in the areas of international trade and economic policy research. She has extensively worked on preparing strategy papers for tapping export potential sectors across sectors and markets, and also on providing policy inputs and industry insights to both internal and external stakeholders of the bank. She has also helped in the preparation of export strategy papers for several state governments in India, and has also worked on institutional capacity building assignments for export financing in partner countries like Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we sincerely hope that this platform will provide perspective from the topic to all the participants. We look forward to your questions and also your feedback for today's session. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite my colleague Janvi to take over the session.
Thank you, sir. We'll just get the presentation on the screen. While we get the presentation on the screen, I would like to thank everyone. We have got very encouraging response on these master classes. We started this in 2019, and we have continued these master classes ever since then on account of the encouraging feedback that we have received on this. So today's presentation broadly focuses on these three broad areas that you see on your screens right now. We'll first begin with the state of the Indian economy, in which the budget was announced. We'll thereafter discuss some key highlights of the budget and then quickly move to the impact on exports and select sectors. Starting with a brief scenario of the Indian economy. Globally, if you see, the global growth has been weighed down by factors such as sluggish demand in advanced economies, tightening financing conditions, and debt sustainability issues. All this has really dragged down the global growth. Amidst this backdrop, India has emerged as a new engine of global growth, and in fact, India was the fastest growing major economy last year. If you look at the growth figures, the real GDP growth was 8.2% in 23-24. This was supported on the supply side by a very strong performance in the industrial sector. With a growth of 9.5%, the industrial sector was the fastest growing sector of the Indian economy. On the demand side, if we see, the investment demand really stimulated the growth. So the gross fixed capital formation, which is reflective of the investment trends, grew at an accelerated pace of 9%, driven by higher capex spending by central and state governments. If you look at the trend in gross fixed capital formation, it has been increasing, and in fact, if you look at the GFCF, that is a gross fixed capital formation as percentage of GDP, it has hit a 11-year high of 33.5% in 23-24. So clearly very encouraging trends there. On the external front, if we see, the current account deficit has been moderating. In fact, the current account deficit nearly halved, more than halved last year on account of fall in merchandise trade deficit, strong net inflows under services trade, and increase in foreign remittances. CAD as percentage of GDP was low at 0.7% last year. This was the encouraging news. Now, let us look at some of the concerning aspects. So, private final consumption expenditure growth, that has been languishing at 4% in 23-24. Now, Indian economy is largely a consumption-driven economy. Private final consumption expenditure accounts for a major chunk of the economic GDP. So that is languishing, and that is a cause of concern. Alongside, inflation has also been a cause of concern, especially since July 2023, when we started to see the food inflation go up, and on and off it has been increasing, and that has been a concern. In the current year, if you see, the inflation has had a downward trend for 5 consecutive months, but it increased once again in June 2024 to 5.08%. Again, we are seeing food basket exerting pressure on inflation. We'll be talking a little bit about this once again when we are discussing the impact on the agriculture sector. Moving ahead, let's look at the key highlights of the union budget. So as I was mentioning, the budget talks about 9 priority areas in terms of sectors. The focus is on promoting growth in manufacturing and services, as also building productivity and resilience in the agriculture sector. There's also a focus on leveraging the demographic dividend of India. So we see employment and skilling and inclusive human resource development and social justice as priority areas. Alongside, CAPEX boost continues with infrastructure, energy security, urban development remaining key priority areas for the government of India. And also there's a focus on technology and innovation, be it private sector innovation or focus on digital public infrastructure. So we see innovation and R&D and next generation reforms also emerging as key priority areas for government towards its vision of developing moving towards a Viksit Bharat. If you look at the expenditure and receipt profile and the deficit indicators, nearly 27% of the receipts come from borrowings. Direct taxes and indirect taxes together account for 63% of the receipts. Non-tax revenue accounts for around 9% of where the rupee comes from, and non-debt capital receipt accounts for 1%. Where rupee goes to, 21% of the expenditure is towards state share of taxes and duties. Interest payments remain high at 19%, and this is something that has been flagged by even rating agencies time and again, the rising debt burden and the high interest payout. But if the fiscal measures work, and if the economy continues to grow at the robust pace that we are seeing, and if the government remains committed, as we saw in this budget also, to the fiscal consolidation path, it would not be much of a concern. If you look at the fiscal deficit indicators, let's first start with discussion on the capital expenditure. So effective capital expenditure, which includes your capital expenditure by the central government, as well as the grant in it that is given by the government to, say, state government, to implementing agencies for creation of capital assets. So there we are again seeing a growth of 18.2%. So again, the government is going very strong in terms of capital expenditure. Fiscal deficit, the consolidation path has continued, and fiscal deficit is basically an indicator of the borrowings of the government for financing its expenditure. That is at 4.9% estimated for FY25. This is lower than the 5.1% that was estimated in the interim budget. So this fiscal deficit is lower as compared to the 5.1% estimated in the interim budget. Now, the government has utilized the extra dividend that it received from the RBI for cutting down this fiscal deficit, as also for spending extra on the development and welfare schemes. Now, going forward, the government expects to continue on this consolidation path and achieve 4.5% of GDP as the fiscal deficit by FY26. Also, the revenue deficit. Now, revenue deficit, what it basically indicates is that the government will need to borrow for its recurring expenses, which will not be used for, which is not being used for generating assets that would lead to future returns. So it is for the recurring expenses, and this ideally should go down, and it has actually gone down. It is 1.8% estimated for FY25. Moving quickly to the impact on exports and select sectors, let us first begin with exports. Of course, these are just overarching areas that I'll be talking about on this slide. When we move to the individual slides on sectors, we will be also talking about the impact on exports from particular sectors. But from an overall perspective, let us look at some of the key developments that have happened on the export front. If you look at some of the key schemes, export promotion schemes, so RODTEP is a very important export promotion scheme, remission of duties and taxes on exported product. There has been a hike in RODTEP allocation of 5.8%. RODTEP is a replacement of the MEIS that we had earlier. It basically reimburses the embedded duties and taxes that go into the production of exported products, and there the allocation has increased. ROSCTL is a similar scheme that is there for made-ups and garment sector, and there also we are seeing a hike of 10% in the allocation. If we then look at another scheme, that is the interest equalization for rupee export credit. Now, this is a very key support that the government of India provides for bringing down the financing cost for exporters, and it has been an extremely helpful scheme for exporters. The allocation for this scheme in the budget is 1,700 crore. This scheme was ending in June 30 this year, June 30th this year. The government has extended it for 2 more months till August. On and off, this scheme has been extended, and we expect that the scheme will be continued thereafter as well. But the allocation as of now there is a reduction in the allocation for this particular scheme. 1700 crore that has been allocated is nearly 54% less than last year's budget allocation for this particular scheme. Moving forward to the duty changes. Now, in terms of custom duty changes, there have been several changes this year, all aimed at boosting competitiveness, reversing inverted duty structure, and creating an enabling environment for exports and manufacturing for export capability creation in the country. E-commerce again finds a mention in this year's budget as well. E-commerce is a low-cost method for MSMEs to enter into the export space. The entry barriers are really low, and that is why this is a very, very important. So again, this is a very important avenue for MSMEs and traditional artisans to sell their products in international markets. What the government intends to do is it wants to establish e-commerce export hubs, which will be set up in PPP mode. Another important initiative is a reduction in corporate tax on foreign companies. This rate has been reduced from 40 to 35%. This would attract investments, and these investments in turn will boost value chain linkages and boost exports from the country. There's also focus on export capability creation. There has been significant hike in the production-linked incentive scheme allocations across several sectors. This will boost export capacities in several sectors. And finally, 12 industrial corridors are also being built. This will again support export capability creation in the country. Now let's first talk about the agri and food processing. This has been a constant mention across budgets, a focus area in all the union budgets. This year there has been a focus on sustainability, research, self-sufficiency, boosting supply chain linkages. If we look at the allocation for agriculture and light sector, it was 1.52 lakh crores. The government intends to have a comprehensive review of the agricultural research framework, both to improve productivity as well as to have resilience to climate events as well. So last year our crop production in fact fell on account of weather events and that actually affected the macroeconomic variables as well. We saw that the food inflation has been a cause of concern, and that is why focus is required even for building resilience to climate risk events as well. So what the government intends to do is in the next year it plans to release some new 109 high yielding and climate resilient varieties of horticulture crops. Natural farming, which has been discussed in previous budgets also, again finds a mention in this budget, and the government plans to establish 10,000 need-based bio input resource centers. Again, self-sufficiency has been a key, especially in pulses and oil seeds, which have typically been an area where we have significant import dependence. On the oil seeds front, especially our import dependence is nearly 55 to 60%. We typically get it from countries like Indonesia, Brazil. So the government wants to develop a strategy for achieving self-sufficiency in pulses and oil seeds. And another area has been setting up of what the government intends to do is wants to set up large-scale clusters for vegetable production closer to major consumption centers. This will bring about economies of scale and cut down costs. So that is the entire motive here. Then there is also some announcement with regard to irrigation and flood mitigation support in states such as Bihar, Assam, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, and Sikkim. Technological innovations in agri-tech has been a focus area again for several years now. This year, what the government has announced is that it will implement digital public infrastructure for agriculture, and they will cover farmers and their lands over a period of 3 years. It plans to do an annual digital crop survey during the Kharif season in 400 districts. Plus, farmers, there will be a mapping of farmers with their land parcels through farmer and land registries. Apart from that, Jan Samad-based Kisan credit cards will also be enabled in 5 states. What this is expected to do, all these initiatives, is it will probably enhance the formal credit penetration among the farming sector. There's also focus on cooperatives and FPOs. In agriculture sector, especially, cooperatives play a very major role because it allows farmers and farmers to pool their resources and emerge stronger together. So what the government has announced is that it will be coming up with a national cooperation policy for development of the cooperative sector. It would also promote FPOs, cooperatives, and startups for the vegetable supply chain. From the exports perspective, I would like to highlight there that the government has announced that it will be setting up 50 multi-product food irradiation units and 100 NABL accredited food quality and safety testing labs. This is especially very critical for exports. Agri exports, one of the key issues that agri exports face is the SPS issues, that is the sanitary issues that it faces. These non-tariff barriers, they can be addressed through proper testing infrastructure. And that is something that the government is attempting to do with this. This will help meet the quality standards in export markets. Pharma and healthcare, the allocation is around 90,000 crores for the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Several custom duty changes in this sector. Some are, of course, aimed at decreasing the cost of healthcare. For example, BCD exception has been provided for cancer medicines for improved healthcare. Apart from that, BCD has been reduced on X-ray tubes and flat panel detectors, which are used in medical X-ray machines under the phase manufacturing program. Now, phase manufacturing program is aimed at boosting the domestic production. And the medical devices, we have substantial import dependence, around 80% import dependence in medical devices. So these kind of incentives, reduction in the input cost, will help boost manufacturing of medical devices segment. In orthopedic implants and manufacturing of other artificial parts of the body, also the input duty has been exempted to boost domestic manufacturing of these products as well. On lab chemicals, however, the custom duty has been increased to check dumping, but this could increase R&D costs for corporates, and that could be one area of concern. In terms of PLI, there has been an increase in budget allocation for the PLI in this sector. Also, research. This pharma and healthcare is a very research-driven and innovation-driven sector. So one important announcement has been that the Anusandhan National Research Fund for Basic Research and Prototype Development has been announced. Apart from that, there is also a financing pool of 1 lakh crore that has been announced for driving private sector research at commercial scale. These are expected to boost the research and innovation for pharma sector as well. The sunset clause has been extended for goods supplied under the patient assistance program run by specified pharmaceutical companies. This is also expected to bring down the cost of healthcare in the country. Moving ahead, defense and aerospace. Defense and aerospace has traditionally been a very important sector for the budget. This year, the defense budget accounted for 12.9% of the total budget. So that's a huge number. And if you see the budget, defense budget, it has increased from 5.94 lakh crore to 6.22 lakh crore. More than a quarter of it is towards capital outlay. This will create a lot of opportunities for defense and aerospace companies, because what the government also intends to do is that 75% of the modernization budget will be earmarked for procurement through domestic industry. So this will create procurement opportunities for defense and aerospace company and build defense capabilities in the domestic market. Custom duty changes have also been announced in this sector to boost manufacturing in the defense and aerospace sector. Some exemptions were in fact extended, and on 25 critical minerals, new exemption has been announced. These are important for defense manufacturing. The government also wants to position India as an MRO hub, and for this purpose, there have been some changes. Duration for export of aircraft and vessels imported for MRO activities has been increased from 6 months to 1 year with possibility of additional 1 year extension. Apart from that, the time period of duty-free re-import of goods that have been exported under warranty has also been increased from 3 to 5 years. This is expected to benefit the MRO industry, combined with the recent initiative where there was a rationalization of GST on import of components or parts required for MRO activities. This is expected to provide a boost to the MRO segment. Again, defense and space sector is something which has a lot of scope for innovation, and there are a lot of companies that are engaged in deep tech and space economy. The government has announced a venture capital fund of 1,000 crore for the space economy. Alongside, there's an allocation of 400 crore for defense innovation through the Aditi scheme, which provides grant and aid of up to rupees 25 crore for R&D and innovations in defense technology. The PLI for drone and drone components has also been hiked by 72.7%. Again, a very encouraging fact for the sector. Clean energy. The Ministry of New and Renewable Energy received an allocation of 51,591 crore, which was a 78% hike. And for grid connected solar power, there was a 110% hike in allocation. If you look at the solar segment, the government has given an impetus to the installation of rooftop solar panels under the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana. Under this, the government intends to provide free electricity up to 300 units every month to 1 crore households in India. There have been exemptions in custom duty for certain additional capital goods that are required for manufacturing of solar cells and modules. This is another area where we have significant import dependency, and domestic capacity is gradually increasing. This duty is expected to improve this exemption in custom duty is expected to bring down the cost and boost domestic manufacturing of solar cells and modules, and help eventually reduce the import dependency. The duty exemption that was there on solar glass and tinted copper connectors, that has been revoked because it is considered there is sufficient domestic capacity. This will also not affect the sector as much because there is enough domestic capacity to cater to the requirements in this segment. Nuclear energy is again a focus area, and it is a clean energy, okay, and the carbon emissions, greenhouse emissions are almost negligible in this sector. The government plans to develop Bharat small reactors as part of its push towards towards developing nuclear energy capabilities. Along with the private sector, it also wants to work on developing new technologies and undertaking R&D for Bharat small modular reactors, as well as other new and nascent technologies. Now, Bharat small reactors are basically very compact nuclear reactors, which are designed for small scale use and not for large scale use, as it is the case in normal large industrial nuclear plants. It is for small scale use, and this is expected to boost the utilization of nuclear energy also for moving towards a more cleaner energy mix. One of the concerns with renewable energy is that the supply can be intermittent, especially with solar and wind, which depend a lot on the weather and can really vary depending on the weather. So the government is also working on a policy of pumped storage, which will facilitate electricity storage and enable smooth integration of renewable energy in the energy mix. And another focus area has been the energy transition support to micro and small industries. Now, large scale sectors have typically adopted clean technology and are already undertaking transition activities. However, micro and small industries, it is still the adoption of these transition activities is really low. So what the government plans to do is it wants to undertake investment grade energy audits for traditional MSCs in 60 clusters, including for brass and ceramic, which are more intensive, which require more support. And it will also provide financial support for these MSMEs to shift to cleaner forms of energy and implement energy efficiency measures. So again, the focus is on even taking the micro and small industries towards low carbon pathways, more greener pathways. Now, for the next couple of sectors, I would ask Neha to take you through the key measures and the impact.
Thank you, Janvi. So we move on to textile and leather. So there are a couple of announcements and allocation related measures, some positive, some neutral. So we'll start with the positives. PLI allocation for the textile products, which mainly focuses on man-made fibers and technical textile segment. It has grown by more than 8 times. And likewise, the PM Mitra scheme for integrated textile region and apparel park. So there are 7 states that have been selected for the Mitra scheme very recently. And the allocation for that has also increased by almost 6 times. So again, that is a positive. These two will actually help bring in a lot of investments and leading to competitiveness first domestically and then obviously also export competitiveness. And on the downside, however, if you look at the PLI for leather, the PLI for leather and footwear has actually only got an allocation of 0.1 crore rupees, which is very minuscule. Also, if you look at the duty reductions in the leather products, especially the finished leather, the duty reduction has been now to nil. So it will actually make imports of finished leather cheaper, which could affect, to some extent, it could affect the competitiveness of domestic producers. It could increase the competition in that area. So that is one downside. But however, some other duty reductions have also been done in the sector. For example, the reduction in custom duty for MDI. It's an important input for yarn manufacturing. And so a similar measure was also undertaken a couple of years ago to boost yarn manufacturing. And at that time, it was brought down from around 8% to 7.5%. Now MDI custom duty has been brought down further to 5%. So I think it would help boost yarn manufacturing. Similarly, some real down filling material from duck and goose for manufacturing textiles and jacket, and especially for exports. So this would help bring down costs for exports. And likewise, even certain accessories and embellishments that are used in leather products and textile for exports, that has also been brought down to nil. So which would also help improve your export competitiveness. So these, so there's a mix of positives and certain downsides. Overall, it's a neutral impact for the whole sector. If we look at automotive, again, like Janvi had also mentioned that the PLI allocations in several sectors have been increased in this budget, and automotive is a key beneficiary. 623% hike in the allocation to automobile. So that is a great positive. This would help attract investments, build competitiveness, and obviously exports. And if also another duty exemption has been introduced for lithium, copper, and cobalt. All three are important inputs for manufacturing of EVs. And given the impetus that is being provided by the government for strengthening manufacturing of electric vehicles in the country, this is definitely a positive move. There's also recently a scheme that has been introduced by the Ministry of Heavy Industries, which is a scheme to promote manufacturing of electric passenger cars. That also aims to attract OEMs manufacturing electric vehicles into the country. And a 13 crore allocation has been made towards that scheme. It's a very new scheme. So we'll have to see how the scheme pans out and what is the response. Another duty exemption that has been withdrawn is for batteries for EVs, considering that there is a PLI for ACC batteries. This is actually to promote the manufacturers of batteries domestically in India. So this is again a boost to the sector. On the flip side, I would like to also mention that there is no clarity as such on extension of the FAME scheme. Basically, FAME scheme has been very important for creating demand for electric vehicles in the domestic market. As of now, the current FAME scheme is available only till 31st of July this year, and there has been no extension announced. If the extension is not announced anytime in the near future, then the adoption of EVs, especially two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, may be hampered in the absence of any incentives. So that is the flip side. But overall, the budget has been positive for automotive sector as a whole. Coming to a few other merchandise sectors. Firstly, gems and jewelry. Both the measures that have been introduced in the budget for gems and jewelry are directly going to benefit exports because first is your reduction on import duties on gold, silver, platinum. So India's exports of precious metal jewelry heavily relies on imports of gold doors, bars, likewise silver doors, bars, and even platinum. The reduction in duty to 6% for gold and silver and 6.4% for platinum would actually ease the cost and also promote value addition for export purpose. It's a direct positive. Similarly, safe harbor rates for foreign mining companies selling raw diamonds would actually enhance the access of raw material for Indian diamond cutting polishing segment. Cut and polish diamond is actually the largest segment within the gems and jewelry industry for us in terms of exports. So this would actually ease our access to raw material. So therefore, this is a straight positive. If we look at electronics, there have been a couple of custom duty changes. Firstly, let's look at the custom duty reduced for mobile phones and chargers. So basically, India exports around $15 billion of smartphones, while the imports are only around 900 million, which is very minuscule. And majority of the imports that we do of mobile phones are premium mobile phones. So the custom duty reduction could actually make these premium mobile phones slightly cheaper, considering they pass on the cost benefit to the consumer. On the other hand, custom duty for PCBs for mobiles and certain other inputs for connectors and oxygen-free copper for resistors, these could actually help in domestic manufacturing because these are critical inputs used in the domestic manufacturing. So therefore, that could be a positive, but overall, it's nothing more than custom duty changes as we can see. But apart from that, of course, like Janvi already mentioned, the PLI for electronics sector has got a boost in allocation. So therefore, from that point of view, the sector can benefit. So it's sort of neutral in that way. Moving on to metals, so there are again several custom duty changes in metals. But one thing that I would like to mention here is the reduction in duty for ferrous scraps. So ferrous scraps, especially steel scraps, can help reduce our emissions in steel production. In India, the emission from steel production is around 2 to 2.5 ton per ton of crude steel produced. But if we use ferrous scrap, and there is an interesting statistic that says that if we use for every ton of ferrous scrap used in steel scrap used in steel production, it could lead to a reduction or avoidance of emission by 1.5 tons of carbon dioxide. So that is huge. And so this measure of reducing duty on ferrous scrap is a move towards a more circular and a more climate friendly sector, so to say, for reducing emissions in the sector. Likewise, if you see The budget also announced that there is a climate finance taxonomy that is going to be developed. Again, that would also help the steel sector in getting transition finance. And also there is a hike of 500% in the allocation to green hydrogen. Now, viewers will be aware that recently the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy announced an implementation plan or an implementation guidelines for a pilot project for use of green hydrogen in the steel sector. This is under the National Green Hydrogen Mission. Now, in that, one of the thrust areas is substitution of fossil fuels in the steel industry towards green hydrogen. Now, a hike in allocation of green hydrogen can again help steel sector move towards green steel, and also this would also help in exports from the point of view of your reaching your developed economies like EU, where there's already a carbon border adjustment mechanism that has been in place, that is in place now, and is going to affect this industry. So the move towards green steel would actually benefit from the hike in allocation to green hydrogen. Apart from that, if we look at power sector, uh, the total budgetary allocation to the sector is now substantial at 21,400 crore. There are several power projects, and one of that is the JV between NTPC and BHEL. This is actually not just going to ensure energy security, but also going to promote use of uh, ultra supercritical technology, which are advanced technologies in the power generation. So from that point of view, again, it's and apart from the thermal power, I think Janvi has already spoken about the clean energy, that is also a focus. So the budget has actually laid its emphasis clearly on energy security. Couple of other merchandise sectors. One is your chemicals and plastics. Again, just a few BCD adjustments. Actually going to impact higher input costs for downstream industries. If we look at marine products, there were two major measures. One is the financing for shrimp farming and exports through NABARD. And the second is the brood stock. So brood stock, fish feed, we are heavily reliant on imports for imports of brood stock and fish feed. And we import a majority of these from developed economies like US, and around 70 to 80% of the fish feed brood stock used in India are imported. So therefore, reduced BCD would actually help ease the cost for in the aquaculture sector, and would also help in betterment of export competitiveness, cost competitiveness of exporters. If we look at oil and gas, again, also there is a reduction in BCD of capital goods used in petroleum exploration. This would help in reducing the capital cost. And if we look at cement as such, so there is no direct measure for cement, but the demand for cement is derived from housing projects, infrastructure projects like industrial corridor, road projects, etc. And as you will see, as we'll see in the next slide, so there's a lot of attraction on that front, on the front of construction. So therefore, cement is also likely to be positively impacted. Yeah. So like I said, construction has received a huge boost in this budget. 11.11 lakh crore of total allocation to infrastructure. This is a 17% hike as compared to the revised estimates of the previous year. And there's also a 1.5 lakh crore allocation to states under the 50-year interest-free loans for infrastructure development. And all of this directly benefits the construction demand. If we look at segment-wise road connectivity, there is a phase 4 of Gram Sadak Yojana that has been announced, which will be providing all-weather connectivity to around 25,000 rural habitations. There's also industrial development that has been announced through 100 plug-and-play industrial parks. There's also 12 industrial parks under the National Industrial Corridor Development Program. Apart from that, several measures were announced for strengthening infrastructure in the eastern states under the Purvodaya scheme, including road connectivity and also irrigation and flood relief projects in flood-prone areas like Bihar, Assam, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, etc. Moving on, tourism also found its mention in the budget this year. Majority of the announcements were related to spiritual, religious tourism, natural and cultural tourism in states like Bihar and Odisha. Apart from that, simpler tax regime for foreign cruise companies has also been announced. This could help domestic cruise vessels and promote cruise tourism. And also, there's a focus on strengthening infrastructure in the tourism segment, and therefore a 60.7% hike in allocation to the tourism infrastructure has happened in the budget this year. And if we look at the banking, financial services, and insurance sector, there are several initiatives that will directly boost the credit demand. One is the housing loans, push to housing loans because of additional houses being built through the PM Awas Yojana. Both PM Awas Yojana Urban and PM Awas Yojana Rural have received significant hikes this year. And there is the PM Awas Yojana 2.0 under which interest subsidy has also been announced. Likewise, an interest subvention has also been announced for education loans to 1 lakh students annually. This will improve the credit demand from the educational loan segment, which is one of the largest personal loan segments in the country. Then if you look at certain other measures, one is the banking network that has been announced in 100 branches of India Post in the northeastern region. So from that point of view, I think the impact of the budget is neutral because it mostly focuses on the demand side. On the credit delivery side, of course, the IBC ecosystem is a focus for achieving consistency, transparency. An integrated platform has been announced to be set up, but we'll have to see how it pans out. And lastly, the MSME sector. I think MSME sector is an important focus of the budget this year. Several announcements have been made, and all of them aimed at addressing MSME's financing gaps. So I would like to take a moment to share that Exim Bank is also conducting a study on the MSME industry. And under that study, we have conducted a survey. And we found in that survey that around 40%, 43% of the MSME respondents have highlighted access to finance as a key challenge, and therefore the schemes that have been announced in the budget this year for MSMEs is indeed timely and pertinent. Also, I would also like to mention here that our MSME study is ongoing, and if there are any MSME participants that have joined us today, we would encourage you to write to us, email us, if there are any concerns or suggestions that you would like to highlight to us, and we would be happy to consider it. I think with that, we come to the end of the presentation. We would be happy to take questions.
So if you have any questions, please put it in the comments box here and we'll be taking them. Also, as Neha was mentioning, apart from the MSME study, also you can share your feedbacks for this session on our ID ccg@eximbankindia.in. I will type it in the chat box here. If there are any questions related to the budget, related to any particular announcement, you can ask us through the chat box. We'll wait for another perhaps 2-3 minutes. If there are any questions, we'll take them. Okay, so we have a question. Any announcement for project exports? Not particularly for project exports, but the ideas under which Exim Bank, at the behest of Government of India, extends lines of credit to partner developing countries for meeting their development priorities. There has been an increase in allocation there. Also, project exports are largely being undertaken by construction companies, capital goods companies. So we are seeing a lot of domestic activities also happening. So that will also help them, like the companies that are executing project exports outside, that will help them they will be able to perform on account of domestic activities as well. Yes, so the interest subvention scheme for rupee export credit that has been extended for 2 months, that has been extended to only MSMEs, and there is also a cap per IEC code that has been announced. So definitely, the intent is that only MSMEs who actually face a higher incidence of cost on financing cost, they receive the support under the interest equalization scheme. Large corporates, as it is, benefit from much finer rates. So that I think the intent is to focus more on the MSME sector. But the scheme is announced. Scheme has been extended only for 2 months. So let us see. Perhaps there's another scheme in the works which gets announced after that, and there we may have some different provisions. So we have a question: is there a deadline which has been provided by when climate finance framework will be developed? Secondly, will this be developed by MOF? I think we do not have any deadline that we know of for the climate finance framework. And from what we understand, it will be a whole of government approach. It is not just MOF. There will be other stakeholders, MNRE and all will be also consulted for this. Okay, I think if there are no more questions, we would like to thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to your continued participation in our master classes. We'll be having many more such master classes, not just on impact of union budget, but on other topics as well. Please keep a watch on our social media handles to keep a track of all these events. Thank you very much for joining us today.